All right, guys, welcome back. It's our first grammar lesson in the second semester. Time flies, so let's go ahead and get started. So, a complex sentence is made up of two parts: an independent clause and a dependent clause. I'm going to abbreviate IC and DC sometimes so that you know. An independent clause is a complete thought. It can stand alone as its own sentence. A dependent clause is not a complete thought. It depends on this independent clause to make itself a sentence. So what we're going to do, we're going to learn how to diagram a complex sentence, and we're also going to label the sentences that you have at the bottom of your page. So we're going to do the first two together. I will label each one first, and then I'll diagram each one. So when I'm labeling, I'm going to just put one underline under my independent clause. I'm going to put 2 lines under my dependent clause. And it's really important that you know where your dependent clause starts, especially when we diagram. So let's look at this first sentence. We slowly entered the theater where Lincoln was shot. So our independent clause is we slowly entered the theater. That could be a sentence by itself. Then we have where Lincoln was shot. Where Lincoln was shot is an adjective or an adverb clause because it tells us where. So that's going to be independent. It cannot stand by itself. This is a dependent clause. So independent clause, dependent clause. So when we diagram, we're going to look at our independent clause first, just like we would. So let's diagram that. Subject, we. Verb, entered. Direct object, theater. We're left with our article, the, and our adverb, slowly. Then we're going to diagram our dependent clause. So we'll have Lincoln, was shot, where. So what we need to do to connect these two sentences is put a dotted line between them. And we are going to start our dotted line where independent clause stops. So we'll start it at theater, and then it's going to go to where our dependent clause starts, where. So for this sentence, it's going to look just a little funny because we're going to have to make a turn. So we're connecting theater and where. Helps us see where our dependent clause started. So let's look at our second sentence here. The woman who just left the room will probably be the next president. So, independent clause. The woman will probably be the next president. Is our independent clause who just left the room? Dependent clause. So who just left the room is in a positive. It's interrupting our independent clause, but that's okay. So let's diagram this one. Woman is our subject. Will be is our verb. President is our predicate nominative because will be is a linking verb. And then we're left with our adjectives and adverbs. So we have the next, and we have probably. And that is our independent clause. So now we need to diagram our dependent clause. So we'll use who as the subject of that. Left is our verb. Room, direct object. Then we have the article for room. And then just is an adverb describing when the room was left. So now we need to connect the two parts of the sentence. So the dependent clause starts after woman, so that's where we're going to start our dotted line. And then the dependent clause starts with who, so we're going to connect woman and who with a dotted line. Not too bad. Pretty much what you guys have done already. A lot of review in there. Just finding where your dependent clause starts and then connecting with a dotted line. So some things that you need to know as far as tricks of the trade. You need to remember that your dotted line in a diagram starts where your independent clause ends, and the line ends where your dependent clause starts. Also, some things to know about punctuating independent and dependent clauses. If you have a sentence where your independent clause comes first, your dependent clause comes second, you will never put a comma between them. Do not want to do that. Now, if you have a sentence where your dependent clause introduces your sentence and then an independent clause comes after it, it's okay to put a comma there. So, I think that's pretty much it for an introduction to complex sentences for you guys. So, make sure that you do the next 3 sentences for your homework tonight, and then we will see you tomorrow.